Dear guests, hello. On behalf of National Office of Crimea Platform, I am pleased to welcome you here today at this unprecedented event for experts representing different countries and regions. Thank you all for finding the time and opportunity to participate in person or to join online. I am grateful to the powerful civil society organizations that have made it possible to organize this event. We, for our part, as a representative of the public sector responsible for the internal dimension of Crimea Platform, supported this idea and contributed to its implementation as much as possible. Special thanks to Maria Tomak, who head of our Crimea Platform, and all our team of Mission of the President. For me personally, both as a permanent representative of President of Ukraine in Autonomous Republic of Crimea and representative of the indigenous Crimean Tatar people, the issue of the occupation of Crimea is a personal issue and to which I have devoted my activities since the beginning of the occupation. First, in the civil society sector, as the chair of the board of the organization Crimea SAS, which was responsible for helping Crimea residents in connection with the events of the occupation. Since 2019, I have held various positions in the public sector, but whatever I have been since 2014, my activities have been exclusively related to Crimea, my small homeland that was taken away from me. When we talk about Crimea, we needed to realize that it is not only about territory, it is primarily about people. We have to bring back from the occupation our citizens who are forced to live there because of the fear of losing everything. We must ensure the right to return for those who did not accept it and left Crimea. This is also a personal pain for me. I have not been home for almost 10 years. I understand that for me, going home is a way to prison, as happened to my friend, first deputy head of Majlis of Crimean Tatar people, Nariman Dzhemilev. In 2021, he came from Crimea to open the first summit of the Crimea Platform. Upon his return to Crimea, the occupiers fabricated a criminal case against him, accused him to sabotage, and sentenced him to 17 years imprisonment. To better understand this pain, imagine that you can travel to almost any country in the world, but you cannot return home. And so it has been for decades. That is why we are talking about the need to liberate the entire territory of Ukraine, including, of course, Crimea. And that is why we call on the wild world to support Ukraine in this matter. Today, there are many representatives of the Ukrainian government, parliament, civil society, diplomats, and the expert community here. I hope that we'll all be able to have a fruitful discussion and discuss the important issue that concerns us. Thank you, glory to Ukraine, and I give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Ruslan Stefanchuk, the head of Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada.
Dear friends, dear guests, for better understanding me, please use headphone, because I'll speak in Ukrainian. Вельмишановна пані віце-прем'єр-міністр.
Esteemed Vice Prime Minister, organizers, dear Tamila, Your Excellencies, the participants of the conference, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to say thanks to the organizers of this event for this very important initiative. Also, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the participants. Some of them have come over 1,000 kilometers, thousands of kilometers to be here to talk about Ukraine, to talk about our struggle. For me, also, it's an extreme honor to take part in this three-day event which will be dedicated to the matters of Crimea. And I really hope that it will help to look at the issues of the occupation of the Ukrainian peninsula and overall to the challenges of this unprovoked war of Russia against Ukraine, which is going on for over 10 years. Let's remember, on the 20th of February 2014, Russia, upon the order of the highest political leadership, has illegally invaded Ukraine and occupied Crimea and the city of Sevastopol. And just a few months after, in 2014, the Russian Federation invaded the Ukrainian Donbass and occupied some areas of Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Unfortunately, up until today, these areas are controlled by the occupiers. Last year, on February the 24th, President Putin issued an order to launch a full-scale invasion into Ukraine, and the world has seen the war in Europe unseen from the end of the Second World War. The war, which was barbaric, bloody, and cruel. This war is waged in medieval methods with total disregard of the international humanitarian law and rules of war. Today, the Ukrainian armed forces keep fighting against the aggressor, liberating Ukraine from the invader. And they know that we will liberate all the territory within the internationally recognized borders as of 1991, when Ukraine got its independence. Now, I suggest to look at this war from a global dimension. How is the Russian invasion perceived by the governments of the so-called global south, the countries of Africa, South America, and Asia? Some say that this war over thousands of kilometers, just like any other war, well, it of course produces impressive and bloody images, but it's not really tangent to their interests. But I think that people who say so are really not far-sighted politicians or public officials. Because this war, according to these not far-sighted politicians, this war, as if it could be stopped at the table of negotiations after the agreement, and then this turmoil will be over and the world will get back to the previous status quo. But is it really like this? Is it truly a regional conflict? Can it be resolved here and now at the table of negotiations? In order to objectively respond to these questions, we have to consider all the facts and circumstances of this war. Firstly, the aggressor state is one of the permanent 5 members of the Security Council of the United Nations. And the matter of legality of Russia's occupying that seat has many issues. And Ukraine is one of the founders of the United Nations organization, so we say it responsibly. But the reality is as it is. The system of supporting peace in UN is paralyzed. This organization cannot take any decision because the aggressor has the right of veto. I'm confident that all normal people understand that this is absurd, but this is reality. Secondly, Russia has one of the biggest nuclear arsenals globally, and as a barbarian, they keep rattling the nuclear saber. They keep threatening to apply nuclear weapons. Just this fact, as such, already is a grave violation of the international law. But is there a mechanism to really safeguard the world against the nuclear war? It's obvious that there's none. The factor of deterrence, already is preventing other countries which would otherwise be more brave condemning this medieval barbarianism in the heart of Europe. Russia is weaponizing anything it can to pressure Ukraine and international partners. For example, Russia has lots of oil and gas deposits, and the trade of those is no longer the trade as such. It's a tool to undermine the prices in the market, expecting the destabilization of the internal markets in the consumer countries. We've seen that last year in Europe, and I am very happy that Europe has learned their lessons and found a way to minimize Russian oil and gas blackmail. Russia is blockading seaports, preventing Ukrainian grain to be shipped outside to the global markets. And there is a looming threat of the global food crisis. Another factor, this is the history of relationship between Russia and its neighbors. In the last decade, we have seen that Russia does not want to get rid of the imperialist past. It strives for total domination in the region, following the model of the metropolis and satellite colonies, so the modern USSR 2.0. Russia is still the source of political instability for its neighbors, the source of frozen conflicts which can be reignited any second. So the response to all the questions, obviously, is that, well, the war of Russia against Ukraine cannot be stopped at the table of negotiations. If the war is frozen, if the initiators of this war, if those who have been committing crimes in the occupied Crimea and Donbass, and those who commit war crimes now are unpunished, this will mean only the preparation to the new stage in this war, which would be even wider and more and bloodier. No, this war of Russia against Ukraine is not just a matter between two countries or a regional conflict. This now touches all the world, because the war is back as a tool of interstate relationship, yet the world does not have a tool, an effective tool, to prevent it or to resolve. The terrorist attack of Hamas on Israel reaffirms this point. The Russian regime has given a clear signal to all the dictatorships and terrorist units that the international law is weak and the world cannot cope. So, dear participants, if altogether we don't stop Russia, we'll see new and new wars, we'll see new and new terrorist attacks, and we will have less and less time for the adequate response, less time and opportunities. That's why Ukraine will not start the negotiations with Russia while the Russian troops are within our international recognized borders. And that is why we are not even thinking about some territorial giveaways, because for Ukraine we have no difference between the Donetsk or Lviv region, between Kiev or Crimea. The president has offered its peace formula. It's a well-known 10-point plan which has been supported by all our friends and allies. This formula is aimed not just to restore peace to Ukraine and to Europe. It would help prevent the war for the future. It would help relaunch the international security framework by creating the foundation for the new, safe and just world order. Dear participants, I'm confident that the discussion in this hall will help us find new angles looking at the occupation of Crimea and the significance of the war for the whole world. I'm sure that the countries who try to distance themselves from, as if the war, which is really foreign to them, are now becoming aware that actually this war is against their interests. And I hope that we continue this discussion in different formats. Like, for example, in Prague, soon we will have a new parliamentary summit of the Crimean platform. And this year we'll have even more heads of parliaments, and I'm sure that the geography will expand. The geography of supporters of Ukraine will expand. But I know that the whole world will win, because We want to respect the principles enshrined in the UN Charter, and this will be the decisive factor. I wish you all success at this conference and to reach the conclusions which are very important for peace, which definitely will come. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. Is the microphone working? Yes. My name is Vadim Karpyak, and I will be moderating this panel. I would like to welcome us all. As Tamila Tasheva has duly said in her introduction remark, when we talk about Crimea, it's not about the territories as such, but it's about people, first and foremost. So I'm very happy to invite Tetiana Pechonchyk to the rostrum. She is the head of ZMINA, the Human Rights Center in NGO.
Colleagues, I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you with a welcome speech from the co-organizers of the conference, united by the idea and brave position of the Crimean Platform Office and a number of NGOs to restore, or in many cases, to start a dialogue between the civil society of Ukraine and the world countries outside the borders of Europe. After all, the world has changed. We have a multitude of challenges facing global humanity. Impunity of repressive regimes that persecute political opposition or activists, destabilizing entire regions. Climate change that leads to unpredictable tsunamis, fires, famines, or problems with polluted water and air. Armed conflicts that lead to the destruction of entire cities, targeting women and children. Blockage of sea chains and transport corridors that result in rising food prices on other continents. These challenges have no boundaries or rules. The world has changed, which means that we are changing too. In the history of every country, there is an event that became a turning point for its people. For Ukraine, it is Russia's occupation of the Crimean Peninsula and start of the Russian aggression in Donbass in 2014. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians were forced to become internally displaced persons. And the indigenous people of Crimea, the Crimean Tatar Muslims, were once again persecuted and oppressed. After the deportation to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, which was organized by the Soviet regime in 1944, after long and painful years of return, the Crimean Tatars again suffer from the Russian repressions in Crimea. This oppression, together with the Russian aggression in the east of Ukraine, changed the Ukrainian state and society, changed the Ukrainian human rights landscape. After all, during the last almost 10 years, we as civil society activists not only defend the democracy and human rights inside the country, but on the first place, we deal with a devastating external aggression. Now we have to apply all our knowledge to document war crimes and crimes against humanity committed by Russia during its unprovoked invasion of our land within internationally recognized borders. That is why the key to learning about Ukraine and understanding the nature of Ukrainian resilience lies in Crimea. This war is genocidal in its nature. Russia denies the very existence of the Ukrainian nation and our right to have our own state. But it is also the war of dictatorship against democracy. Today, Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men and women with weapons in their hands defend the borders of the free world, and many have given their lives for it. To pay tribute for their bravery, we must remember there will be no global security without the victory of Ukraine, and there will be no long-lasting peace without justice. Dear colleagues, on behalf of the civil society co-organizers, I am privileged to welcome you at this conference. It is organized by the International Center for Ukrainian Victory, Media Initiative for Human Rights, Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union, International Partnership for Human Rights, ZMINA Human Rights Center, National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy, and the Ukraine 5 AM Coalition. We all are grateful for you to come in here, especially to our distinguished guests from Africa, Asia, Southern and Central America, who made a long journey to be with us, to have the opportunity to jointly find solutions to the problems and challenges facing the global humanity, to have the opportunity to build new connections and initiatives, to talk about food security, energy independence, and the architecture of international law, to seek ways of solidarity and support for the protection of women's rights, children, and the rights of national and religious minorities. I wish us fruitful work in the coming days to acquaint Ukraine. Thank you.
Дякую, пані Тетяно.
I thank you, Tetiana, and I would like to pass the floor to the first Vice Prime Minister, Deputy Minister of Ukraine, to Yulia Svyrydenko. So once again, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Economy of Ukraine, Yulia Svyrydenko. Good afternoon. Very happy to welcome all of you. And I would like to say that the occupation of Crimea was a turning point for all of us. When the Russian aggression has started, when the war in Ukraine has started, and we have a complete understanding that only when the final Russian soldier will leave the territory of our peninsula that we'll be able to say that this war is over. The recovery of Crimea after the deoccupation, this is one of the priorities for the government and not just words. Just recently, we had a visit of the President of Ukraine to Canada, and we've signed the trade agreement, and there's a special place in that agreement in the minorities. That is why we're already working on the plans, on the strategies for the recovery of Crimea, the occupation of Crimea, and I would like to say that 2014 was a shock for the Ukraine's economy, just as the shock that we had with the beginning of the full-scale aggression. But I wouldn't like to base my today's statement on the negative aspects. Instead, I would like to say that even the most pessimistic predictions said that we would have a very significant drop of GDP. We did have a historic breakthrough by having the drop in the economy by 29.5% of the GDP, but now we're already having an increase. This year we're planning to have around 4% increase of the GDP. Next year there will be a 5% of the increase of GDP. Of course, special attention should be applied to logistics, to logistical corridors. That's why you have a very good title, Crimea Global, and that's really important. Why is it so crucial to discuss this matter? Because the freedom of navigation in the Black Sea, that would result in the global food safety. A number of other aspects I would like to raise. We're talking a lot about the post-war recovery plans, but a special attention is placed on the recovery of Crimea. We are already identifying some of the industries that would serve as the locomotive for the further development. We're talking about energy, transport, the IT industry, then military-industrial complex, as well as the construction industry. And surely these industries will have their own development throughout Ukraine, including on the territory of the peninsula. And we are already analyzing the role that Ukraine might be playing in the post-war global world. To complement the statement by Ruslan Stefanchuk, I would like to say that those leaders of the state who believe that the war in Ukraine is taking place a very distant, in a very distant area, and that it will not have any impact on the instability of their own countries, they are mistaken. I can give you some examples. For example, a supply of grain to Somalia. Well, just 50,000 tons, that's 2 ships that were sent under the presidential program called Grain from Ukraine. This figure looks minor, considering the total amount of export of 16 million tons, but that is the figure that is able to change the Somalia market absolutely, because the total consumption is around 700,000 tons per year, meaning our 50,000 tons of grain, that is a month of supply of Somalia with the food. So that's the month that we are providing the food support to the whole country. So that is a direct impact on the food safety. Should we recall the situation of India? India is one of the largest buyers of sunflower oil from Ukraine. So when we have a restricted maritime navigation, when we have a restricted logistics, so the population of India will be affected, and some of the population are using the sunflower oil on a daily basis. So our restriction of navigation will have a direct impact on the food security and safety in your regions. That is why I absolutely agree that the issue of food safety is very acute, not only for us, but it will have a significant impact on the global South countries, because we do export a lot into Europe as well as into the countries of global South. Therefore, the freedom of navigations is something that we'll be asking your assistance to support. This is where your point of efforts should be as much significant as possible, as this will have an impact on the global food safety. And as long as Russia is blocking the maritime ports, surely will continue to expand the capacities of the ports in the Danube River. Surely will have the exports of product through the Hungary and Romania, and the President Ukraine had some agreements with the President Iohannis, that's the President of Romania. We were planning to increase the transit from 3 million tons to 4 million tons, so hopefully there will be a railroad connection for the transportation of grain from Ukraine to all the way to the maritime ports of Romania. And surely the tasks of the armed forces of Ukraine is to make sure that the Russian forces would withdraw from the Black Sea in order to prevent their impact on the navigation of the ships in Black Sea. And we at the Ministry of Economy, we are currently working on ensuring the air insurance for those maritime vessels, and hopefully we will provide with an effective tool on how to recover this very soon. And in the context of supporting Ukraine by the global South countries, of course I have to mention the humanitarian demining aspect, because we are the most contaminated country with the mines in the world, and that has an impact on the global food safety. And overcoming this challenge is something that is crucially important for us, and it's important to have the experience of the global South countries for that. We're currently establishing cooperation with Cambodia, because they still have issues with demining. The humanitarian demining in that country is still ongoing, but we don't have 70 years to demine the whole country. That is why combining our efforts with the global South countries could help us to make Ukrainian soil safe and to bring this stability to the global food safety. And this is a part of the President of Ukraine peace formula. We have tight connections with the Southeastern Asia, with Northern Africa, with the Far East, with the Middle East. Surely the war and the impact on the Black Sea and the impact on Crimea has an impact or is affecting the global south. That is why we do need your support, the support of our partners in our struggle. Surely we are ready to share our experience, our lessons learned, as we call it, because having a neighbor like that, we would definitely need to make some conclusions out of these lessons learned. We should get united. We shouldn't think that the war is taking place somewhere far away. It's close, in fact. So I'm very grateful to the organizers for combining the members of the government, civil sector, and many others, so that we could discuss the solution to all those global challenges that we all face. Now, I wish all of us to have a fruitful cooperation in the next 3 days, and I would like to say that we have to stay united. It is only through unity that Ukraine will win. And in this case, the whole world will win as well. Thank you. I thank to Yulia. Now, I wanted to pass the floor to Alexei Danilov, the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, but and I'm not sure if he's with us. Well, unfortunately, he's delayed because of certain issues, and I guess the Ruslan Stefanchuk also has a number of state issues, and I'd like to express words of gratitude for the participation in our program. I'd like to say that we are using English and Ukrainian language today, so in order to be able to listen to simultaneous interpretation, you would need to take the headsets, as well as you might be needing the headsets for simultaneous interpretation from Crimean Tatar language. And I would like to pass the floor to Maksym Subh, the special representative of Ukraine for the Middle East and Africa. Please, Maksym, the floor is yours. Madam Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine, Tamila, dear guests, Your Excellencies, the ambassadors, I'm very grateful for the possibility to deliver you the vision of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine and to tell you how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is fulfilling the directive of the President of Ukraine and the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine on countering the aggression, on reinstituting the territorial integrity of Ukraine, as well as on revitalizing our military, economical, and investment connections with the global South countries. As the special representative of Ukraine for the Middle East and Africa, my area of responsibility covers a lot, covers this region, which is somehow called the Global South. We're talking about the African countries, the Middle East countries. I would like to say that since the beginning of the large-scale aggression of Russia against Ukraine, it was due to the intensive policy of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as in coordination with the Office of the President of Ukraine, as well as the government of Ukraine. Our state is currently evidencing an unprecedented revitalization of contacts with the global South countries on the overall, as well as with the countries of Africa and Middle East. Today, I have prepared a statement that I wanted to introduce but sitting here, and I was really inspired by the speech of Yulia Svyrydenko, and she inspired me to have this briefing delivered in Ukrainian language to tell you what is my daily work about. And I would like to start my short speech with the words of gratitude to all of our partners represented here in this audience, as well as those joining us online for their unwavering support in the protection of our territorial integrity and independence and sovereignty, the deoccupation of all the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine, including the Crimea. As you know, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is actively engaged in the implementation of the initiatives by the President of Ukraine, as well as the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. And as you've already heard today, there's a Ukrainian program called Grain from Ukraine. Now, this program is particularly designated to ensure the global food safety, and it is also designed to show that without Ukraine, it is impossible to have the consistent development as well as the global food safety. We can see that these initiatives that are presented by the Ukraine word to word are gaining more and more support. The peace formula by the President Zelensky and its implementation, it required significant efforts on the part of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It also required the coordination of the central executive authorities of Ukraine. At the same time, I have to say that with every additional briefing, with every additional meeting on the implementation of the peace formula, we can see there's more and more countries from the global south, countries from Africa, from Middle East, from other countries of the world are joining in this process. And that means that the cause, this rightful cause that is currently defended by Ukraine, that is the restoration of peace and territorial integrity, as well as the bringing the aggressor to accountability, this is the values that are cherished by all of our partners, not only in the West, as Russia would like it to show, but the global South is also expanding. They are turning to the side of those defending the righteous cause, defending the provisions of the UN Charter. In this respect, I would like to say that it is Ukraine, since it was affected by the largest conflict since the times of the Second World War, Ukraine was the first to appeal to the need of complying with the international laws and regulations. And the events we are currently seeing also, they should be resolved through the implementation of the UN resolutions that are against the terror, against the violence, against the illegal activity of the countries. Therefore, those provisions that are currently supported by Ukraine through the peace formula, they are universal. This is the roadmap not only to the establishment of the peace in Ukraine, but in the whole world.
And to finish my address, I would like to emphasize that another evidence of having very highly intensive contacts and relationship with the global South would be the multiple, which amount to hundreds or definitely more than hundreds of consultations and discussions of the President of Ukraine, the Chair of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, other key government representatives with peers in the countries of the Global South. The Minister of International Affairs has conducted 3 missions to the African continent, and everywhere at every place where Ukrainian officials are traveling to the countries of the region that we call the Global South, we deliver the very clear message. We are not here to set you against somebody. We are here to discuss our equal and mutually rewarding partnership, the interests of the rights and the rights of the nations for their freedom, as well as guarantee the safety for the rest of the world. The global food safety, which has been referred to earlier, is one of the key elements in the agenda of our cooperation with our international partners. And we are working productively to support other initiatives of the Global South and associated to different international conferences and other big-scale events which are implemented under the framework of the Crimean platform and the parliamentary dimension. So with that in mind, I would like to emphasize once again that we at the Ministry of International Affairs will pay every possible effort and beyond to improve our diplomatic representation, particularly under the scope of the presidential initiative regarding the African continent, to develop our stronger collaboration. And we are grateful to the government as well as the Parliament of Ukraine for amending the national budget, which has increased allocations to the Ministry of International Affairs, which will strengthen our capacity to deliver on our commitments when representing the interests of Ukraine in bilateral and multilateral relationships, seeking improvement cooperations with our partners across the entire world. And last but not least, let me extend our appreciation to all of the delegates who have arrived to Kyiv these days from the distances which are quite remote, both in terms of geography as well as political alignment. And thank you for supporting us in spiritual manner as well, in building our resilience to fight for our sovereignty. Let me wish you fruitful discussions, productive communication, and we are quite confident that results of this forum, which will last for 3 days, will serve as foundation for the concept papers to be developed by our governments in close cooperation with you. And we really appreciate your contribution. And with that, please join us to the motto, Glory to Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you, dear Maksym. And to make sure that our discussions are productive, but at the same time they abide by some standards of colloquial language used in literature, we have a special address by Abdulrazak, who is the Nobel Prize for Literature. Could we have your attention to his video presentation, please?
Hello. Thank you for inviting me to join you in your Crimea Global event. I'm sorry that it's not possible to be there. I would very much have liked to be there with you. I hope your gathering will be an excellent one and will produce greater understanding and some resolution of the issues that you will be discussing. I'm happy to join you with these few sentences to show solidarity with you in these months of danger. I join many thousands of people across the world, from north to south, in Africa and elsewhere, in commiseration for the unprovoked and brutal aggression by Russia. And I join many thousands of others in admiration for your people and your armed forces, for your courage and resistance against this imperialist onslaught. I pray that your resistance succeeds and that you sustain your freedom from such brutal aggression. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Це був пан Abdulrazak.
This was an address from Mr. Abdulrazak. Now we have another address from the Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Mrs. Karman.
It's really my honor and privilege to express my unwavering support for Ukraine, a nation that has shown the world the true meaning of courage, unity, and the pursuit of freedom. My support for Ukraine and Ukrainian people is not just a gesture of solidarity. It is a commitment of the principles that should bind us all together as a human. It is a commitment to justice, freedom, and the fundamental human rights to every individual, that every individual deserves these human rights, which started with freedom, justice, and its right to live in a country that has a full sovereignty and doesn't have any kind of equation and invasion and interfering from the outsiders. So again, I salute the resilience of Ukraine this resilience is embodied by its people who have faced adversity with remarkable strength and courage. The sacrifices made by the Ukrainian people in the face of war and invasion are a testament to their unwavering commitment to defending their nation's sovereignty and their vision of democratic purposes and united Ukraine. In our interconnected world, the struggle for freedom is not limited to Ukraine alone. It is essential to recognize the broader context in which Ukraine's aspiration for freedom and sovereignty are intertwined with the experience of other nations, particularly those in the Arab Spring countries. Those who find themselves surprised by the actions of Putin and the Russian government toward Ukraine should not be. Since 2015, Putin has been involved in a killing and displacing millions of people of Syria who are fighting for their freedom and dignity against a brutal dictator, Bashar al-Assad, and also now against the invasion and the brutality of Russia. Putin, his government, and his army has led to immense human suffering, displacement, and destruction in Syria. Russian forces have committed numerous war crimes and violations against innocent Syrians. Putin believed that the world's silence regarding his violation in Syria was approval for his crimes there. Later, Putin believed that his invasion of Ukraine would pass without any question, without any problems, without any objection or accountability. And because of that, he waged the war in Ukraine and he invaded Ukraine. So, as Ukrainian people struggle and sacrifice for their freedom and dignity, there is other people in the world also sacrifice and struggle for their freedom and dignity from the Russian oppression, like Syrian people. So we are with you and we share with you the same battle, the same dream, and the same victory. And it's very important when we discuss the war in Ukraine, the freedom for Ukraine, it's very important to struggle to address a very important issue, which is the need to end the impunity for international crimes and gross human rights violation. Putin has to face justice. Accountability should be there. Those people who committed war crimes should be tried in the International Criminal Court. And Putin is the first criminal that should be there. Dear sisters and brothers, the de-occupation of Crimea and other Ukrainian territories is not only a matter of restoring Ukrainians' territorial integrity, but also a crucial step toward justice and accountability. It is a reminder that violations of international law and human rights abuses should not go unpunished. Finally, once again, thank you all Ukrainian people for your great effort, for your great Nobel battle for your freedom. And believe me, that you are in the first line of the battle that will free all the world from dictators. So thank you a million times. Your freedom is our freedom. Your struggle is our struggle, and your victory is our victory. See you soon in Kiev. مع السلامة.
Я теж дякую пані Тавакулі, теж сподіваюся побачити.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Tavakul, and we were also looking forward to have Oleksandra Matviychuk to take part in our event today. Unfortunately, she could not attend this meeting in person, but we have her video address. Please, can we have your attention to the screen?
It's a huge honor for me to address to this distinguished audience. I am a human rights lawyer, and I have been applying the law to defend people and human dignity for many years. Now I am in a situation when the law doesn't work. Russia started the war of aggression. Russia commits horrible atrocities against civilians. Russia deliberately exterminates indigenous people, Crimean Tatars, and the entire UN system cannot stop it. I have one question. How we people live in 21st century will defend the human beings, their lives, their freedom, and their dignity? Can we rely on the law, or does just brutal force matter? It's important to understand that only for people in Ukraine, Iran, Syria, or Sudan. The answer to this question determines our common future, because it's not just a war between two states. This is a war between two systems of authoritarianism and democracy. And Russia started this war not in February 2022, but in February 2014, when Ukraine obtained a chance for the quick democratic transition after the collapse of the authoritarian regime due to revolution of dignity. And in order to stop us on this way, Putin started this war. Russia occupied Crimea, part of Lugansk and Donetsk regions, and last year extended this war to the large-scale invasion. Because Putin is not afraid of NATO, Putin is afraid of the idea of freedom. And in this war, Ukrainians are fighting for a freedom in all senses, for a freedom to be independent country, not Russian colony, for a freedom to be Ukrainians and preserve Ukrainian identity, not to be forced to educate our children as Russians, and for a freedom to have our democratic choice, like a chance to build a country where the rights of everybody are protected, government is accountable, judiciary is independent, and police don't beat students who are peacefully demonstrating. We live in a very interconnected world, and we Ukrainians have to listen the stories of people from other countries as well. And this forum is a unique opportunity for this. We can be very far away from each other through geographical context, but we are very close in our values, because only spread of freedom make our world safer.
Це була Олександра Матвійчук.
This was Oleksandra Matviychuk, and with that, I have the pleasure of inviting to the stage for a special address the leader of Crimean Tatar people, Mr. Mustafa Dzhemilev. Dear Mustafa, you're welcome.
Değerli misafirlerimiz, Uluslararası Crimea Global Konferansı'nın değerli iştirakçıları. Zamanınızı ayırıp
Our dear guests, the participants of the International Conference Global Crimea, thank you for finding time and despite the shelling and security concerns in Ukraine, you still arrived to Kyiv for the benefit of taking place in this conference. We also thank you all those who will take part in performance of this conference, but in the online format.
Konferansımızın esas maksadı bugünlerde devam ettirelim.
This conference is dedicated to the problem of searching solutions, how to stop this bloodshedding war of Russia against Ukraine.
Savaş bittikten sonra böyle olaylar
It has taken so many lives and still continues developing when we look at the battlefield, which is now trying a prerequisite of sustaining security in the rest of the world.
Ben artık 10. yıl işgal altında olan Kırım Yarımadası'nı kökenli halkın bir temsilcisiyim.
I'm one of the representatives of the indigenous people of Crimea, which is under occupation for 10 years. And the conference is called Crimea Global, and this is not a coincidence. This war, indeed, started from the occupation of Crimea by the Russian Federation in the end of February 2014. And the indigenous people of Crimea, the Crimean Tatar people, is the most persecuted by the occupiers and one of the biggest victims, one of the parties which suffered the most. It is because of this reason the organizers asked me to address you with the introductory remark. For many years, we've been hoping that we will manage to achieve the liberation of Crimea from the occupation through the peaceful and diplomatic path. We hoped that the global community would make the Russian Federation fulfill the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, dated 27th of March 2014, demanding to immediately stop the aggression and to take the troops out of Crimea. It never happened. Moreover, 8 years after the occupation of Crimea, Russia has started a full-scale invasion into Ukraine and occupied new territories. Now, over 123,000 square kilometers of our territories are under the occupation. And this equals to the territories of Austria and Belgium multiplied by 2 and combined. The total number of people killed in this war, including the peaceful citizens of Ukrainians, is now in hundreds of thousands. Dozens of thousands, including children, are now disabled. Recently, I ended up with a severe cold to a famous Kiev hospital, the Feofania Hospital. And I was shocked by a huge number of the Ukrainian warriors who are getting treatment there, young people without limbs. Many hospitals in Ukraine are now filled with the victims of Russian bombardments. The rocket strikes of the aggressor country have destroyed thousands of residential buildings, destroyed and many valuable cultural heritage sites are destroyed, educational facilities, health facilities, religious buildings. Many countries in the world, first and foremost the Western countries, are now well aware that if the aggressor will not be defeated and punished for the crimes committed, instead the opposite, they would get a certain bonus for committing the crimes, the bonus in the form of new territorial acquisitions, then these would pose an essential threat to the whole international order. That is why they immediately started providing essential assistance to our country diplomatically through imposing economic sanctions to the aggressor country and supplying weapons to protect our country from the aggressor. We wholeheartedly appreciate these countries, and I pray the Almighty to give the well-being to the peoples of these nations. The number of countries who openly support the aggressor can be counted in the fingers of one hand. Unfortunately, many countries in the world still remain callous to our bloodshed, to the bloodshed on our soil. Some countries do not only not join the sanctions against the aggressor country, but they are trying also to extract some profits out of it. They try to sell their produce to the aggressor state at a higher price and to buy the natural resources cheaper. For example, one many million populated country after the full-scale aggression, February 24, 2022, and the Western sanctions against the aggressor has increased the purchase of Russian crude oil 19 times. Another country, which calls itself the Islamic Republic, in grave violation of all the norms of principle of Islam, is actively selling its strike drones to the aggressor, which Russia uses to destroy the infrastructure in our country and to kill our children. Almost every year, the United Nations General Assembly, they discuss and they approve the resolutions on grave violations of human rights committed by Russia on the occupied territories. And first and foremost, it's about the indigenous people of Crimea. We talk about the kidnapping and killings of the representatives of the nation and terrible imprisonments for 20 years behind bars for just some saying for the speech against the occupying regime or for storing the literature which the occupiers don't like. The political prisoners are kept in terrible conditions and with degrading treatment. Many countries at the United Nations General Assembly do not support the resolutions. They do not vote against, they just abstain during voting, and in this way they want to show that they are neutral with regards to the international crimes. Our president, of course, for diplomatic reasons, would never reproach or accuse other countries that they have not been helping our country to fight the cruel and cynical aggressor who cold-bloodedly observed how thousands and thousands of our citizens are killed and their children are deported to the occupied country so that they would be made so that they would forget their language and so that they would be Russified and forget the national culture and turned into the enemies of the state, so that the infrastructure would be destroyed. But I'm not a diplomat, and according to the upbringing which I received from my parents, I got used to always call things for what they are, regardless of the consequences for me. That is why I spent a great deal of my youth in Soviet prisons and gulag. And I never regretted that because I was following my moral duty. I defended human dignity, in the cruel fight against the Russian regime for its rights, the civic rights, first and foremost for the right to live in my motherland in Crimea, from which our nation has been totally deported and subjected to genocide in May 1944. Many of our compatriots went through Russian camps and prisons. I must say that in these years we have been fighting not just for, in those years we've been fighting not just for our rights. In the court verdicts against the activists of the national movement of Crimean Tatars, there are accusations that they were protesting not only against the lawlessness towards the compatriots, but also that they were protesting against the occupation of Czechoslovakia in 1968, against the occupation of Afghanistan in 1979. They were supporting the legal demands of Japan to return the occupied islands of the Kuril Islands, and they were protesting against the use of Soviet psychiatry for the purpose of punishment. We were coming from this moral principle that fairness and justice, such as freedom, are indispensable. One can't only strive for justice for oneself and then make the conscience be silent when the justice for others is violated. We cannot just start calculating what you give me, I give you. So I would like that in the discussions, the political leaders would be guided first and foremost not by the economic considerations or mercantile interests, but through this feeling of justice and responsibility for international law. And I really hope that in the course of this forum, in these days, you would help find ways to dispel the lying Russian propaganda about this war, and you would bring the day of just peace on the basis of the 10-point peace formula proclaimed by the President of Ukraine and supported by many countries of the world closer to us. I also hope that my last dream to be buried in the soul in the land of my fathers will come true. I would like to thank you once again for the participation in the conference.
Дякую, пане Мустафа.
Thank you, Mustafa. Now, this was an important welcoming remark, and now on behalf of the organizers, I would like to announce a short break until 11 o'clock. At 11 o'clock, we start the first discussion panel, moderated by Olga Ivazovska, and we will talk about sustainable peace. So now you have time to have some tea or coffee, and at 11 sharp, we start again